WOODSHOP 156, Mr. Mannon in here, and in this video we're going to build a cheater mortise and tenon mallet. Why do we call it a cheater? Because we glue the pieces around the handle. All right, but it creates a mortise and tenon, and we're going to use different species of hardwoods. We've got some alder, walnut, cedar, soft maple, and oak. All right. The only power tools I'm going to be using in this video are prepping the stock, basically cutting it to 2.5 inches wide. What's important is that all the wood is exactly the same thickness. We're going to be using straight line and surface hardwoods, so they're 3/16 of an inch thick. And yeah, like I said, I'll be cutting them 2.5 inches wide. And from there, everything's going to be done with hand tools, squares, hand saws, all right, shaping tools, etc. All right, so we're gonna get started with a drawing. So once again, we're gonna call this the cheater mortise and tenon mallet. Cheater mortise and tenon mallet. All right, from my drawings, I can now create a cut list. The handle is going to be 12 inches long, 1.5 inches wide, and once again, the thickness on every piece is 13/16. So let's write down the handle. Equals 13/16 by 1.5 inches by 12. That's all in inches. All right, then the next two pieces are going to be the outsides of the mallet head. All right, those are going to be 13/16 by 2.5 by 5. And then we're gonna call these pieces right here, right, these two small ones which make up the mortise, we're gonna call those the fillers. And those will be 13/16 by 2.5 by 1 3/4 in length. All right, now what's really important here is that the filler pieces and the handle are exactly the same thickness, right? If the thickness varies a little bit on the outside pieces, it doesn't matter, but the filler and the handle have to be exactly the same thickness, and you'll see me check that later when I cut these pieces out. All right, with my drawing done, I'm gonna go ahead and prep some material using the table saw, cutting it to 2.5 inches wide, and then cutting to various lengths on the miter saw. For the rest of this project, I'm gonna be using hand tools to cut my pieces of wood. So I've got a piece of alder that's 1.5 inches wide for my handle. I've got a piece of cedar that's 2.5 inches wide for my fillers. And then I've got a piece of walnut that's 2.5 inches wide for my outside pieces. All right, so time to get the hand tools out and refer to our cut list and start cutting things up. Hand tools. All right, to get started, we're gonna need a tape measure, a square, sharp pencil, and a decent handsaw. We will also be using a vise, workbench vise, to hold things. All right, so let's get started. We're gonna go ahead and cut out our handle at 1.5 inches by 12. I'm gonna start by marking it with a V right at 12. Take my square, square it across that V. The vise. Now I'm gonna take my finger and use it as a guide. Right. Cutting on the outside of the line. And go nice and easy and hold the other end as you finish the cut. Measure 5. Mark it. Let's go ahead and cut one more. All right, the next thing I need to do is cut my filler pieces. These two right here, and those are gonna be 1.75 inches long, and I'm using cedar. 1.75 inches. They're just small little pieces. Inch and 3/4. All right, and if all is good, it should fit all together. Our next step is gonna be gluing this up with wood glue and wood screw clamps. So the first thing I want you to do is line up everything how you want it, right? Make sure everything fits, and then you're gonna go ahead and dry clamp it, which means clamping it without glue. I'm gonna go ahead and fit my wood screw clamp. This will take a little bit of practice, but the goal here is to clamp it tight enough so everything stays together when you lift it up. All right, equal pressure all the way across. Now, once you get it dry clamped, all you do is loosen up the back handle, right? Slide everything out, and let's apply glue. Now I'm going to go ahead and slide this back in the wood screw clamp, right? And all I have to do is tighten up that back handle. All right, next step is a little glue cleanup. Now this is a good time to look for any gaps. If you have any gaps here, you can always take a mallet, line things up, but make sure that glue is wiped down thoroughly. Last thing I want you to do is make sure your name is put on there, and period. Because in about 2 hours, I'm gonna unclamp this and put it underneath the glue table here. And if you're in my class, every period there's gonna be about 30 of these. So this way you'll be able to tell which one is yours. All right, I'm gonna let this sit for a couple hours, and then we'll come back and do the detailing, the fine tuning of the mallet. It's been about 2 hours since I glued the mallet up. During that time, I prepped all the wood for your project. This is all the handles, stock at 1.5 inches wide, and this is all the mallet head stock at 2.5 inches wide. All right, let's go unclamp the mallet. Here's our mallet, our cheater Mortise and Tenon mallet, and you can see it's in its rough stages. The handle is still really square. The ends are a little uneven. So I brought out some hand tools that we're gonna use. The Nelson hand plane. We're gonna use that to smooth the ends and the top. I've got a coping saw that we're gonna use to cut down the handle. Put a nice curve here to make it more comfortable grip. And then a spoke shave. All right, to break the edges of the handle and the mallet head. All right, let's get started by planing the ends here. So I'm gonna start by planing the ends here. Now, what's important is you gotta use a backing block, right? When you plane this, it's gonna be behind the block in the direction that you're going, and it keeps the wood from splitting out. All right, so in order to do this, I'm gonna have to clamp it on its side like this. I'm gonna put everything in the vise. Nice and level like this. All right, and this is gonna allow me to plane this way. And you can see my backing block is breaking off and splitting, but my mallet head is not. Now I cannot plane this way because this wood right here will split out. So I have to go in the direction towards my backing block. I'm just gonna plane that until the glue lines are smooth. Let's flip it over. Yeah, you can see how that split out pretty well right there. All right, it's okay that it happens to this piece of wood. We just don't want it happening to our mallet head. All right, so the ends are smooth. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take the plane to the top here. I do not need a backing block on this because I'm going with the grain. All right, and smoothing it down. Now, if we're uneven here, we're not gonna be able to get a plane into this section, so we'll have to sand and file that. We'll get to that later. All right, the next thing I'm gonna do is mark a little section on the handle. I'm using my finger as a guide. Just a curved section. Now I can do this on one side or both sides. All right, but you can see my line right there. And I'm gonna go ahead and put this in a vise. And on this cut, I'm gonna use a coping saw. Right, this allows me to make this curved cut. Right, here's the blade. I'm gonna be cutting on the pull stroke. That means it cuts as I pull towards myself, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and move the camera so you have a better view. All right, so you can see the top of my saw is hitting this. So what I can do is turn the blade a little bit. I just change the angle, and then it puts this on the other side of the handle. All right, I would consider that a pretty rough cut, but that's okay, because we're gonna smooth it up with a spoke shave. Next, I'm gonna bevel the ends of the handle by using a handsaw. Now I'm going to use either the spoke shave or a file rasp to break the edges right here and all the way around. All right, so breaking the edge is just putting a 45 on it, like I did right here, or I can use the rasp. This is actually my favorite tool for doing this. You have a bit more control. It's a rougher cut, but a bit more control. And I'm gonna do that all the way around. The handle's been rough shaped with the rasp and spoke shave. Now I'm gonna go ahead and deal with the mallet head. As you can see, the corners are very sharp. Now, this is not good because it could damage the project that you're working on, that you're hitting, and it also is sharp to the skin. So what we're gonna do is break the edges all the way around the mallet head. So I'm back in the vise. And there's a number of tools I can use to do this. I can use a hand plane at an angle. Right, just be careful when you're going cross grain, you chip it out. You can use the spoke shave again. Right, or the rasp. And what I mean by breaking the edge and bevel is this. Right, you can see that I put a small 45 on that edge and that edge right there, and I'm gonna do that all the way around every corner of this mallet head. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and take the file rasp and use the file side, that's the less coarse side, and go ahead and clean up all the edges that I just broke on the mallet head and the handle. Right, occasionally you need to clean your file with a wire brush. Get out all the shavings. All right, all the edges have been broken. The handle's shaped. Now we just need to sand this down really good. Over at the Festool sanding table, I'm gonna start with a coarse grit of 120 and then finish up with a finer grit of 220. All right, just finished up with the 120. I'm gonna go ahead and put on the 220 for my last bit of sanding. Last thing I'm gonna do is apply a wipe-on poly. All right, gonna let that dry for a couple hours. All All right, you guys, that's a wrap on the cheater Mortise and Tenon mallet. Right, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed building this project. Leave any comments below. And all right, you guys, till our next project, stay safe.